Greetings, my fellow Americans, and welcome to another episode of the Great Montana Conspiracy Podcast. Again, before we start, if you happen to be watching this on YouTube, please like and subscribe, share the video. Likewise, if you are on any other platform which this podcast appears, please make sure you share the video with your friends and colleagues. The more information we get out, the more people that share this information, the more we can open their eyes and hopefully affect change. Once again, if you wish to support our program, by all means, look at the information attached to this video. You can get the contact information for both my producer and myself and the various limitations we have in accepting. If you do not see that information attached to this video, you're watching this on some platform, for some reason that text isn't attached, please visit the main source of this podcast, which is monspiracy.podbean.com. Tonight's episode, we're going to talk about internal affairs, mostly because we're talking about the departments and internal oversight, or in this case, the necessity of independent oversight. Internal affairs departments inside police departments and other government agencies are usually departments that are genuinely a semi-independent agency working within the confines of that department. They typically have some degree of autonomy. They don't associate with the normal rank and file, if you will, people who are doing the normal jobs, and they have their own localized duties. Because they don't have a direct affiliation, the idea is that they don't have loyalty, they don't have a camaraderie with these people, and therefore they're able to oversee them with some degree of independence. These programs can be called Internal Investigations Divisions, or IIDs, they can be called Professional Standards Departments, Inspectorate General, Office of Professional Responsibility, Internal Review Boards, etc., etc. But it all comes down to the basic idea of a self-policing agency within the department. The function is to have, in the case of police departments or sheriff departments, is to have officers with no pre-existing association independently investigate wrongdoing or criminal misconduct. Basically, it is the crime-fighting division of police departments, but specifically focusing on the police department itself. In proper function, it provides accountability to errant officers, less blue shield protection. Blue shield being where basically the police department protects their own. Improperly used, it becomes a select group of people that are just designed to rubber stamp the improprieties or the misconduct of the officers involved. Now, here in Flathead County, and as I understand it's the case in most counties in Montana, I can't speak for all counties, but the counties of which I've had contact with law enforcement in some capacity in my time in Montana, they don't have independent internal investigations departments. They don't have internal affairs departments. I know Lake County doesn't. I know Flathead County doesn't. I believe Missoula does not still. Somebody was telling me a few years ago they had actually initiated a program down there, but I'm not sure if that ever came to fruition. But at any rate, the idea is, absent any kind of internal affairs department or independent oversight, officers basically investigate each other. And I use this analogy quite a bit. It's like asking the foxes to guard against other foxes eating the chickens. Obviously, it's not a very effective practice. You don't have the foxes, who are the predators, guard against their own predatory conduct, because they're going to justify it, they're going to rationalize it, they're going to defend the other foxes. The Flathead County Sheriff's Office, the Undersheriff investigates the complaints. In the police department, it's typically sergeants or higher level officers who do the investigating. The problem is that they don't ever find anything wrong with their officers. They protect them, they shield, they find reasons to protect them, they find reasons to defend them. Because they're their friends, they're their colleagues, they're their co-workers, people they see every day. They aren't going to sit there and admonish somebody and then go out and shoot pool with them that night. No, they're going to clear their buddy and then go shoot pool with them, because that's how the little boy network works. I scratch your back, you scratch mine, you know I'm doing something wrong, I know you're doing something wrong, so we protect each other. And that's pretty much how it works. If there's a concern or conflict within the department, they'll have a neighboring county intercede. Like there was a boating accident on Flathead Lake a few years ago. Flathead County Sheriff's officers were involved. They had Lake County investigated. Lake County Sheriff's Department cleared them, no wrongdoing. Obviously alcohol was involved, obviously operating a motor vehicle, even though it was on water, is still a crime. Lake County cleared them. It's just, I scratch your back, you scratch mine. Two good old boy networks cooperating. The proper thing to have done would have been have an independent county that has no clear association or affiliation with this county investigate. Or even have the state level investigate. But of course, no, we got to keep it in-house. We got to keep things close to the vest, because that's how they protect themselves. The problem is, when push comes to shove, law enforcement protects their own. They protect law enforcement. If it's the police department, they're going to protect their fellow officers. If you're sheriff's deputies, you're going to protect your fellow deputies. There's little doubt in my mind that if an independent agency, an internal affairs office of some sort existed in Flathead County, the powers that be would cherry pick these officers and have them rubber stamp everything. It's basically how the Judicial Standards Commission works. They basically appoint judges to oversee other judges, and they simply just rubber stamp everything that goes through. Mike McGrath, head of the Supreme Court, rubber stamps whatever goes through because he believes that judges should be above reproach. You shouldn't be able to question a judge's conduct. So that basic philosophy, that basic idealism exists at all levels of the Great Montana Conspiracy. It exists in the Good Old Boy Network because that's how they protect themselves. Take a recently reported case here in Flathead County dealing with an officer by the name of Deputy Travis Wendt. Travis Wendt had a baby. Congratulations. Proper congratulations, healthy baby. But he failed to report the baby to Human Resources in a timely fashion. Pursuant to the standards of the insurance policy, and a county employee has 30 days from the time that a new family member joins the family, whether it be by adoption, marriage, giving birth, regardless. They have 30 days from the time the person became a member of their family to report it. Very simple thing, 30 days. Very simple. Whether it be, like I said, be birth, adoption, marriage, whatever. Person joins the family, properly covered under coverage, report it within 30 days. It's not an issue. Unless you missed that 30-day deadline. Because this 30-day deadline is a special enrollment period. Otherwise, they have to wait for the proper calendar year to start to re-enroll them. Well, the deputy went and missed the deadline. Don't know why, don't know the circumstances, just know he missed it. Realizing he missed it and wanting to get his child onto his insurance, he contacted Human Resources and asked them to backdate the papers to fix the problem. Can you please backdate this to make it look like I applied within 30 days? Or at least acknowledge that I tried to call in within the first 30 days to report it. The Human Resources Department said, no. There's no record that you tried to call in asking us to backdate this insurance fraud, attempted insurance fraud. And they reported to the County Attorney's Office. When asked if he had actually reported to, when Human Resources asked Deputy Wendt if he had actually tried to call in, he claimed he got stuck in the phone tree. Now, for anyone who doesn't understand what a phone tree is, it's probably pretty simple, but just in case. A phone tree is where you call on a telephone and you have a series of options that will basically narrow down your focus and get you to the right department. So if you called like the main county number, you might have, this is the court, this is the sheriff's department, this is the coroner, this is Human Resources, whatever. And then you select that and it gives you a list of options to follow. And it might be 2 or 3 levels before you actually reach someone. The problem is, Human Resources doesn't have a phone tree. It has 2 direct lines. There's no phone tree to get lost in. So that was a lie. Deputy Wendt not only missed his deadline, not only asked HR to backdate his documents, or just say that he called in 30 days so that he can meet the deadline, then he lied about being stuck in a phone tree that doesn't exist. And rightly so, Human Resources reported to the County Attorney's Office. HR called the misrepresentation a lie. And they called it attempted insurance fraud. To offset the county attorney's investigating this matter, they did what I've been just pointed out. They had Undersheriff take over the investigation. Flathead County Sheriff's Office, Undersheriff Wayne Dubois, did his own investigation. In Dubois' report, Wendt denies everything. He claims he did not ask them to backdate the documents. He doesn't remember asking anything about a phone tree or mentioning anything about a phone tree. He claims he told Human Resources he didn't want anyone to lie for him. So Dubois' conclusion was that no paperwork was ever filed, therefore there was no wrongdoing, and there was no reason to put Deputy Wendt on the Brady list. Now, you want to remember the Brady list? The Brady list is a list of officers who have conducted themselves in an inappropriate capacity, who have basically conducted elements of misconduct, committed crimes, whatever. Their conduct, their behavior, anything that would cast doubt upon their character is rightly reported to the county attorney's office. The county attorney's office is required by law to keep a record of all these officers. Once again, as I mentioned if you go back and actually listen to my podcast on the Brady list, you may recall, or you will hear if you go back to it, that this is largely a voluntary aspect of the individual departments. The Flathead County Sheriff's Office is the one responsible for reporting officers to the Brady list. Just like the Kalispell Police Department is responsible for reporting officers to the Brady list. If the Flathead County Sheriff's Office determines there is no wrongdoing, that he doesn't belong on the Brady list, they don't have to submit the name. Now, the one thing I have not been able to clarify on this story is whether or not his name ever actually got added to the Brady list. I mean, it's a big hoopla. NBC Montana, a local news affiliate here in Kalispell, and actually based out of Missoula, but has a Kalispell affiliate, they did a whole story on this. They blew the story wide open. Congratulations, NBC Montana, for doing something right. It's not very often I get to applaud the local media for doing a good story, but they did a good story here. They didn't take it far enough, but they did a good story. They started the ball rolling because it gave me ammunition to use here, and it gave me something as a starting point. But to date, there's only one officer on Flathead County Sheriff's Department's Brady list, and that is Deputy Matt Vander Ark, which, again, listen to my podcast on this. He made 3 contradictory statements as to the reasons why he didn't submit a body cam into evidence for the defense of somebody whom he assisted in an arrest. The problem is Flathead County Sheriff's Office is trying to keep Wendt off the list. And the entire reason for Dubois' report was to keep him off the list. I mean, why is he even concerned about it? Because he doesn't want his officers on the Brady list. He doesn't want their credibility under question, because a defense attorney can then go up and say, well, Mr. Wendt, you have a history of being untruthful and being dishonest and trying to manipulate circumstances to your benefit. Here's the record. It undermines the ability of prosecutors to actually prosecute cases. And obviously the Sheriff's Department gets a feather in their hat every time they make a good arrest, just like the prosecutor does. It aids individuals who wish to go for re-election and to advance their political careers beyond their current political office, to have successful prosecutions, successful arrests, successful anything, what you're doing. But if you have to manipulate circumstances and lie to cover it up, you have to be dishonest, then the prosecution has an obligation to let the defense know this officer has a history of being dishonest. Because it goes to credibility, it goes to integrity, it goes to a penchant to be truthful. If they have a penchant to be untruthful, to be dishonest, a defense attorney has the right to know that and bring it up in front of a jury. If you withhold this information, if you keep this information suppressed, if you don't put these people's names on the list, then you don't know that. And that's the big deal. Since these lists have been in place since the 80s, one officer before this was put on the list. One. I guarantee you, this county is not a pinnacle of virtue to where every officer has always done everything superbly and above reproach. I have personal experiences. I've reported those experiences, both in this podcast, on my blog, in my books. I have reported this misconduct that I have witnessed that never gets on the Brady lists. I witnessed officers making sexual and physical assaults on teenagers. It's what got me where I am. I tried to report that. It never got anywhere. It never went anywhere. The only where it went was me in prison to cover it up, to make sure it didn't get exposed. That's the only place it went. Incidentally, rest assured, if any common person who's not a deputy or law enforcement tried to call their insurance carrier and attempt insurance fraud, it would be a crime. We would go to jail, we'd be prosecuted. At worst, Wendt will be placed on a list of potentially questionable conduct. No prosecution, no criminal investigation by county attorney, but he's going to possibly get put on a list that suggests he might be less than honest. That's like slap of the hand. But it's not something that the aggressive prosecutor's office or the aggressive police departments and sheriff's department here want. They want to be able to be 100% vindictive to criminal elements. They don't want to give criminals a chance to defend against what they're doing. And when I say criminals, I mean accused people. Because they see them as criminals, regardless of whether they're convicted or not. As I've mentioned before, ad nauseum, the Flathead County Jail is filled with 90% people who are in pre-trial detention. They have not been convicted. They have not been sentenced. They're sitting there waiting for a trial date. They're not convicted. They've not been convicted of a crime. But they're sitting there. Their rights have been stripped from them. They're being detained, and they've not been convicted of the crime of which they're in there for. They are automatically criminals in the eyes of law enforcement and prosecutors. Innocent until proven guilty does not exist. Not here. But herein lies the problem. This is precisely why no one is on the Brady list. Law enforcement, once again, protects law enforcement. Once the Flathead County Sheriff's Office took its own investigation, the conclusion was a foregone. It was a foregone conclusion. There was no doubt what the conclusion was going to be. There was no way the Flathead County Sheriff's Office was going to call out one of their own and say that one of their own did something wrong. This has been the modus operandi since the 80s in this county. We are not going to let our officers be on the Brady list. We are going to keep our officers off the Brady list. And remember, the only reason why Vander Ark ended up on the Brady list was because of a letter that Lori Adams simply said that I can't allow this officer's testimony. Now, I don't even think it was in her intention to put him on the Brady list. I think it was just her intention to let the county attorney's office know this is not a reliable witness. I can't take this person's testimony. Now, keep in mind, a judge shouldn't be doing that to begin with, because that's right there tampering with the record. But that's another issue for another day. But the idea is the only reason why Vander Ark ended up on there was because of a letter from Lori Adams as municipal court judge saying that with 3 different statements she couldn't take the credibility of this witness. The Sheriff's Department didn't have any choice over it and ended up on the Brady list. Only officer. Now, we might have Wendt on there. I'm not really sure. The information I've been able to gather online has not been clear. Whether he actually ended up on the Brady list, whether he did not end up on the Brady list. The only person who's going to be able to answer that probably is Travis Ahner. Just for the record, I do not have a great record with communicating with the Flathead County Attorney's Office. They do not return my phone calls. They don't like me. So it's like the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and again, expecting different results. If I call up and I ask a question and I don't get a call back, and I call up and ask another question, I don't get a call back, and I call up and ask another question, I don't get a call back, I send an email, I don't get a response. After a while, you stop trying. But I welcome, if the Flathead County Attorney's Office, anybody in that office hears this and would like to respond to this, and let me know whether or not Deputy Wendt ended up on the Brady list, fantastic. I'd love to see a copy of your Brady list. I'd love to see a copy of any of your documents supporting as to why you only have potentially 2 people on that list. Love to see it. There's a challenge for you guys. And again, the undersheriff who oversaw this, Undersheriff Dubois, is not an independent agency. He doesn't have his own department. He doesn't run internal affairs, and they don't deal day to day with these officers. He's a direct supervisor of Deputy Wendt. There's no independence. It's a pure conflict of interest. And yet, this is where the investigation will end. There will be no charge. There will be no outside oversight or investigation. At worst, Deputy Wendt will end up on the Brady list. At worst, he'll not get sanctioned. He won't lose job pay. He won't be demoted. Nothing. Nothing will happen to him beyond the fact that he's potentially now on the Brady list. So that would be bad enough if that's where the story ended, but it's not where the story ends, because this gets worse. And actually, it's the part where I think NBC Montana dropped the ball. Big time. NBC Montana reported this, but they didn't follow through. And I got to question why they didn't. But you'll see why, what I'm talking about in a minute. In an email publicized by NBC Montana on their website, it clearly states, and I have to get, unfortunately, I got switched away from the window, but here, it says that an email from Wayne Dubois to Travis Ahner. Now, Wayne Dubois, of course, being the undersheriff, and Travis Ahner being the county attorney. Wayne says, Travis, as for the statement from HR, easily surmountable in my estimation. We are talking about questions posed related to policies that HR has latitude with. I am pretty sure I, and probably you and everyone else employed by Flathead County, has backdated forms before, and in many cases this is totally acceptable. Additionally, policies are guidelines. At times they are clearly broken, in which case a good leader will identify the root cause so they can properly address them. Again, I am most certain anyone in your office has violated either your policy or county policy at some time, as have employees in my office. In the vast majority of cases, this is rectified with a discussion with a supervisor or administrator. Having said that, the investigation should reveal if there are any details we are unaware of. I mean, this is literally an admission of a crime, ladies and gentlemen. It's an admission of a crime. To be clear, backdating a document, regardless of its context, is a crime. It's fraud. Montana law is woefully deficient on defining fraud as a crime. Almost as if people in power don't want to be called on it, maybe. I don't know. But it's woefully deficient. The closest to defining fraud in Montana law is under contracts and other obligations. And it defines what constitutes actual fraud. The first element, paragraph 1, in, by the way, MCA section 28-2-405, paragraph 1. The suggestion as a fact of that which is not true by one who does not believe it to be true. Fair enough. Simple enough definition, right? I like the definition by findlaw.com better because it defines it as a much broader context. Fraud always includes a false statement, misrepresentation or deceitful conduct. The purpose is to gain something of value, usually money, by misleading or deceiving someone into believing something the perpetrator knows to be false. In other words, if you swear to have signed a document on a specific date and you know it's not true, it is fraud. There's black and white. That's what it is. It is fraud. If it is in the course of an insurance policy claim, it is insurance fraud. But any time you backdate a document and you swear that you signed it on that backdated date, it's a crime. And you have the undersheriff confessing in his own words, I and many of my officers have done exactly this. His own words. He said it. I'm not making it up. He said it. It's a confession. Only the difference is he's saying it to who he believes is a cohort in crime, a co-conspirator, and someone he doesn't have to worry about the information getting leaked out. The only reason it did get leaked out is because NBC Montana actually pursued it through a records request and obtained this email. Remember, the important thing here, he says, I am pretty sure I, and probably you, referring to Travis Ahner, and everyone else employed by Flathead County has backdated forms before, and in many cases is totally acceptable. He then goes on to say, again, I am most certain anyone in your office has violated either your policy or county policy at some point, as have employees in my office. That, ladies and gentlemen, is a confession. It's a confession to crime. And this is where I think NBC Montana dropped the ball. Because this is not just dealing with Wendt anymore. This just opened up a huge can of worms. You have a public official, an undersheriff, admitting to committing fraud on a regular basis in an email to someone he considered a confidant and a cohort in crime. You don't have an accident. You don't have him just defending one officer. He's admitting to being complicit in the conduct himself. He's admitting to being complicit. I and every other Flathead County employee, I and everyone else and people in my office have all done this. Let's pause for a moment. Take this in. This is a Flathead County official confessing to criminal misconduct, or under the law, official misconduct, which is a felony in Montana. The underlying act may be a misdemeanor, but the actual act of doing it in the course of your official duties is official misconduct, and it is a felony in the state of Montana. And he just confessed that not only himself, but people in his office, and he assumes that pretty much everybody in Flathead County has done this. He's speaking from personal experience. He's speaking and knowing that these people do this on a regular basis, and he doesn't see anything wrong with it because it's a regular practice. Of course, he later flipped and went back on when NBC asked him, and he said, "Oh no, it's not normal policy to do this." He backpedaled. That doesn't negate his original confession. That doesn't negate the fact that he confessed in an email to conducting criminal behavior, criminal fraud. And it is so common, we shouldn't worry about it because everybody does it. Everybody does it, so don't worry about it. In other words, he's openly admitting to having committed fraud in his official duties. Official misconduct. There's an old psychological axiom that says we judge others by our own standards. If I lie, I'm expecting and believing other people lie. If I steal, I believe other people are stealing. If I backdate documents, I believe other people are doing the same thing. It's a form of rationalization and justification. Through reason or rationality, we justify bad behavior to believe others are doing the same thing. And quite frankly, I don't think he's wrong. Dubois actually says he's pretty sure that everyone employed by Flathead County has done this. And like I said, I agree. I actually agree with Dubois. He's right. This county is so corrupt, yeah. Everyone has probably submitted a backdated document or worse. Lori Adams, remember Lori Adams, the municipal court judge, just said she was the prosecutor on my case who went in at 4:33 in the morning to file fraudulent documents to issue a fake warrant to have me to intimidate me to stay out of Montana. Then I got arrested on that false warrant. She was forced to take those documents down and file them in the court 4 days later. But the warrant for my arrest wasn't filed in the court until 4 days after my arrest because she mocked up a fake file, sent it over to Washington to intimidate me and tell me to stay away from Montana so they wouldn't have to worry about things here, backfired on her because they acted on the warrant, and then she had to actually proceed as if it was a real prosecution. Peg Allison confessed in a letter to me. It's available on my blog, where she admitted to taking 4 documents out of the court docket and putting them on her desk for over a month. By the way, that's called tampering with official records, which is a felony in itself. 4 individual acts of felony tampering with records, 4 individual acts of official misconduct, 8 felonies confessed to in the letter. Nobody's ever done anything with it. It's published, it's out there, ladies and gentlemen, it's on my blog. And for anybody who's not familiar with my blog address, that's Monspiracy, monspiracy.wordpress.com. Take a look. Look for Peg Allison. You'll find her letter. I'm personally aware of dozens of fraudulent acts like these. I mean, the court reporter edited my transcripts of my trial and hearings to remove questionable conduct, where the prosecutor threatened my alleged victim on the stand, where my attorney told the court, I cannot ask you in good conscience to grant this motion for releasing him on his own recognizance. Remove questionable conduct where obviously my rights were violated, or where the prosecution was acting inappropriately. Remove that, strike him, and then never let me have the transcripts or the minutes of the hearing so I can have them independently transcribed to prove the malfeasance. This is misconduct clear across the board. Remember, this all started because I saw officers making sexual and physical assaults on teenagers. This county is wholly corrupt. I don't think Dubois is wrong. I believe this is actually a true admission. I believe he's actually witnessed these things and he's seen it in his own coming up through the ranks. He's witnessing it and he's allowing it in his subordinates because he doesn't see anything wrong with it. It's fraud. You have the undersheriff saying there's nothing wrong with fraud because we all do it. Just think about it for a second. I mean, I just can't get off how simple and why no one sees how wrong that is. Why didn't NBC Montana jump at that lead? Why didn't they take this beyond the point that this is Wendt and one isolated officer to recognizing this is an admission of corruption with the entire sheriff's department? This is a confession by the second highest person in the sheriff's department that fraud is a regular occurrence in his department, and he believes it is a regular occurrence in all of Flathead County. Dubois thought it was a confidential document to a co-conspiracy, the only reason why he confessed. It was only made public because NBC Montana sought it out through a records request. Dubois backpedaled away from it as soon as he was confronted about it. But what he told NBC Montana was that it wasn't a normal practice unless necessary. That's not vague at all. I mean, that's not ambiguous. Unless necessary? What defines necessary? Oh, we missed the deadline, we better backpedal, it's necessary. Oh, we claim we found this on these drugs on him yesterday, but we need to say it was 2 days ago. So let's backdate it because it's necessary to establish why we have him in custody. Whatever. Only if necessary, please. There's never a necessary time to commit fraud. There's never a justifiable period to commit a crime. And to sit here and say you don't do it as a regular policy unless it's necessary, I'm sorry, but you don't. There is no necessary element to commit a crime. There's no necessary point when you can hold someone up at gunpoint. There's no necessary point when you can pull a trigger and kill somebody. There's no necessary element when you can break into someone's house. There's no necessary justification for crime. And you have the undersheriff, the second highest official in the Flathead County Sheriff's Office, saying it's necessary to backdate documents on occasion, or only when necessary. And that's his backpedaling away from his admission that he knows it's going on, and he sees nothing wrong with it, because he himself has done it. He's expecting that Travis Ahner has done it, and that everybody in the entire Flathead County government has done it. It's fraud, ladies and gentlemen. He's acknowledging that they regularly and routinely commit fraud, and it's not that big of a deal. The bottom line is that law enforcement in Flathead County is incapable of their own oversight. I mean, this displays it quite readily. There is no impartiality. It's just used to shelter misconduct in their ranks. Even if there was an internal affairs department, would it be any different? Because guess who's going to appoint it? The sheriff and undersheriff. They're going to appoint the people in the internal affairs department. They're the people who don't see anything wrong with this conduct are going to be the ones who are deciding who's going to be cherry-picked to be on the internal affairs department. The only real hope of oversight for any of this is independent oversight, independent civilian oversight. a group of people existing outside government, outside the police department or sheriff's department or whatever agency, and acting as a civilian regulatory agency. The National Association of Civilian Oversight of Law Enforcement is a nonprofit that was formed in 1995. Their motto is building public trust through law enforcement accountability and transparency. Their mission statement reads, the National Association of Civilian Oversight of Law Enforcement's NACOL mission is to create a community of support for independent civilian oversight entities that seek to make their local law enforcement agencies more transparent, accountable, and responsive to the communities they serve. This agency is already in existence, ladies and gentlemen. It's been around since 1995. It helps local governments do exactly what I'm talking about. It's not a brand new idea. And I love that they have 13 points on their website of the benefits served by doing this. And I'm actually going to put a link into my description because I really believe you need to read these. I mean, I should technically probably read them all, but 13 is probably a bit much. But I'll just read a couple of them. Complainants, people who make complaints against the agency, are given a place to voice concerns outside the law enforcement agency itself. They don't get intimidated, they don't get threatened, they don't get anything. Number two, oversight can help hold the police or sheriff's department accountable for the officer's actions. There's no inside or track to protect them. This is a civilian agency that operates independent of the government, and they aren't influenced by the officers themselves. 3, oversight agencies can help improve the quality of the department's internal investigations of alleged misconduct. Once again, it's independent. They're outside. They have no allegiance. And I'm going to skip all the way down to 13. I'm going to skip a bunch. Like I said, I'm going to provide a link to this so you guys can review this on your own. But by establishing an oversight system, public officials are provided the opportunity to demonstrate their desire for increased police accountability and the need to eliminate misconduct. That's the critical element here in Montana. They don't want oversight. They know they're corrupt. Dubois' comment explicitly displays that. They know they're corrupt. They don't want oversight. They don't want anybody coming in and looking over them. That's why you'll never see this unless something is done at a state level. Because the local county is never, ever, ever going to voluntarily do this. They're going to lose half their department. Just off the bat because of misconduct complaints. They're going to have misconduct complaints coming in all across the board. They're not going to be able to intimidate the people making the statements. They're not going to be able to bury the complaints. They're not going to be able to run around the county attorney's office by having the undersheriff do a special report to hide all this. Bottom line, they're not going to be able to hide. And they want to hide. There is no desire in Flathead County, Montana, to be transparent. I would not be a political prisoner today if that were the case. I would not be where I am today, right now. I would not be hosting this podcast. I wouldn't be spending the last 18 years in the custody of the state of Montana. I wouldn't have my name defiled. I wouldn't have hate messages sent to me all the time. I wouldn't have threats against my person all the time. I wouldn't have any of this life. But for the fact that these people do not want oversight. They do not want accountability. Because when I tried to bring attention to what was going on Main Street in 2003, I got thrown in prison for it. To silence me, to shut me up. And anybody else would have shut up, would have gone away. And I'm this persistent thorn in their side they hate. They absolutely hate me. I have no allies. I have no one. No one wants to be associated with me or affiliated with me when it comes to this government. They do not want to. I have tried to talk to councilmen. I've tried to talk to individual police officers. I've tried to talk to candidates who are running for state office, for federal office. Nobody wants to be tagged with me. I'm the black sheep. Truth isn't popular. It really isn't. But change does not happen if the foxes are allowed to govern the foxes. Foxes are not going to keep other foxes out of the hen house. That's just, how much more common sense can you get than that? As always, as I close tonight, I remind you, if you are watching this on YouTube, please like and subscribe. We're at 750 followers right now, which is really close to our first 1,000 mark, which is fantastic. That's our first major goal to reach. I want to thank all of our followers to date. I also want to make a point of saying that if you do like this video, please share it. Take it to your Facebook platform, take it to whatever social media platform you express yourself in. Send people here. The more people that get this information, the better chance we have of affecting change. Support us through the information attached to this video. And if you find there's no information attached to this video, once again, please feel free to visit us on monspiracy.podbean.com. As always, if you're listening, please be safe, and whenever possible, please be free. Thank you.